"The train isn't stopping in Copper Falls for passengers today," the conductor said, and the way he said it, matter-of-factly, the way a man reports weather, made Ida Marlowe understand before he finished the sentence that something had already gone wrong. She had been traveling for 3 days from St. Louis. She had a carpetbag, a letter, and $9.60, and she had told herself for those 3 days that whatever waited in Copper Falls, Wyoming was better than what she was leaving behind. The letter was from a man named Edwin Corby. He had placed an advertisement in the paper. She had answered it, and after 6 weeks of correspondence, they had agreed that she would come in October, and they would marry, and she would teach at the school near his ranch, and that would be a life. "He died," the conductor said when she pressed him. "Mr. Corby, 3 weeks ago. Fever. The station agent told me when we took on water at the last stop." He paused with the particular discomfort of a man who had delivered news he had not been paid to deliver. "The train stops here 10 minutes for water. You'll need to decide." Ida stood in the aisle and did the calculation that the situation required. $9.60. No return ticket, no one in St. Louis who was expecting her back. Her brother-in-law, Calvin Reese, had made very clear, when he arranged the Corby correspondence, that the arrangement was meant to be permanent in both directions. She had a carpetbag with everything she owned and a dead man's letter in her coat pocket, and 10 minutes to decide. She picked up her bag. She got off the train. Copper Falls, Wyoming, in the 3rd week of October had the thin, brittle quality of a town bracing for winter. The main street ran one direction and stopped at a hillside covered in pine. The mountains in the distance had snow already at the peaks, and the air had the particular sharpness of altitude. 3 men outside the feed store watched her step off with the specific attention that men in small towns gave to women who arrived without anyone to receive them. She did not look at them. She walked to the station agent's window. The station agent, a man of about 50, with a face that had been surprised by nothing in 20 years, looked at her and then at her carpetbag. "You're the Corby woman." "My name is Ida Marlowe," she said. "I understand Edwin Corby has passed." 3 weeks ago. He did not embellish. "There's a boarding house on Pine Street. Mrs. Ponder runs it. She's decent." Ida thanked him. She walked down the main street with her bag and her face composed, and the distinct sensation of solid ground that was not solid. The feeling of a plan dissolving while you were still standing inside it. Mrs. Ponder was a woman of 65 who ran her boarding house the way a person runs a place they have strong feelings about. She looked at Ida's carpetbag and her traveling coat and the set of her jaw, and said nothing about the obvious for a full 3 seconds. Then she said, "Room's $2 a week. Supper at 6. Don't let anyone in this town tell you what you're owed before you know what you're looking at." She said it like advice she had given before. Ida paid for a week. She went upstairs. She sat on the bed and counted what she had left and thought, in the specific way that women who have been managing difficult circumstances think about such things, that she had roughly 4 weeks before the question became serious. She needed work. She needed information. She needed to understand what she had walked into before someone else decided it for her. She was still thinking about that when supper came. There were 2 other boarders, a mining surveyor who spoke only about elevation, and a woman of about 45 named Hetty, who sewed the patches on miners' jackets, and who looked at Ida across the table with the calm, assessing eye of a woman who had seen situations like this before, and had already decided what she thought of them. "You're the woman who was coming for Corby," Hetty said, not unkindly. "I was," Ida said. "He was a decent man." Hetty poured herself more coffee, better than this town usually gives credit for. The front door opened while Ida was working through the last of Mrs. Ponder's stew. She noticed because the room did a thing rooms in small towns did when a specific person entered, a small collective adjustment, a shift of attention that had nothing to do with drama and everything to do with someone of particular weight arriving. She looked up. He was tall enough to notice the doorframe without ducking it. He wore a badge. She clocked it second, which struck her as unusual. Badges usually announce themselves first. He had dark hair going gray at the temples and the kind of face that came from spending years outdoors paying attention to things. He moved through the room with the practiced economy of a man who had been reading situations for a long time and had gotten efficient at it. He stopped when he saw her, Just a half-second pause, controlled, and she saw him take in the new face, the traveling dust still faint on her cuffs. Mrs. Ponder. He had the tone of a man who was sorry to interrupt something and meant it. I won't stay long. Marshal Hartwell. Mrs. Ponder had the air of a woman who had been expecting this. Sit down if you're hungry. I won't. He looked at Ida. He was holding his hat in both hands. She registered it, the deliberate removal, the conscious choice of a man who understood that signals mattered. Miss Marlowe, I'm Luke Hartwell, town marshal. I heard you arrived today. I did, Ida said. I wanted to make sure you knew where the marshal's office was, in case you had need of it. And to tell you that there are people in this town who have been paying close attention to Edwin Corby's affairs since he passed. His voice was level. You should know that before someone decides how to present it to you. She looked at him. She was accustomed to men who said things that sounded protective and meant something else, something proprietary, something that began with, I'm looking out for you, and ended with, so you owe me for it. She looked at Luke Hartwell and did what she always did with men. She looked for the angle, the second meaning, the place where the offer would eventually cost her something she hadn't agreed to pay. She couldn't find it. That was of itself unsettling. Thank you, she said carefully. He nodded. He said good night to Mrs. Ponder and Hetty and left without making a production of it. Hetty waited until the door closed. He's been marshal here 4 years, she said, in the tone of a woman providing useful civic information. In those 4 years, 2 men who decided a woman alone was an opportunity found out that Copper Falls has a long memory and a short patience. She went back to her coffee. Just so you know what kind of town this is. Ida absorbed that. She did not sleep well. She lay in the narrow bed and thought about Edwin Corby, who had been alive when his letter reached her and dead before she'd stepped off the train. She thought about Calvin Reese, who had arranged the correspondence with an efficiency that had taken her 4 months to recognize as convenience. He had wanted her gone, and the Corby advertisement had accomplished that without requiring him to be openly unkind about it. She thought about $9.60 and the particular arithmetic of a woman who has been managing other people's conditions for long enough that the arithmetic has become automatic. She thought about Luke Hartwell, who had come at supper with his hat in his hands and told her to know what she was looking at before someone else decided it for her. She told herself she didn't know anything about him yet. She meant all of it. She went to sleep anyway, which was the first time she had slept properly in 3 days. In the morning, she found work. Gertrude Bain, who ran the mercantile on the main street and was built like someone who had never wasted a minute being anything other than practical, looked at Ida's hands and said, "Can you take inventory and make change without errors?" "Yes," Ida said. "Can you manage difficult customers without my involvement?" "Usually," Ida said. Gertrude Bain had the quality of a woman who respected honesty over performance, so Ida left the qualification in. 7 in the morning, Gertrude said. "Start tomorrow." That afternoon, Luke came to the boarding house, not at supper, in the middle of the afternoon when the street was quieter and the visit was clearly deliberate. Mrs. Ponder called up the stairs. He was in the parlor when Ida came down, hat again in both hands, and he said, "There's a document at the county office I think you should see before anyone else gets the chance to explain it to you." She went with him. Edwin Corby's will was filed with the county clerk, and a copy had been held at the marshal's office at Corby's personal request. Luke set it on his desk between them, without comment, and let her read it. She read it twice. Edwin Corby had left his property, 62 acres along Copper Creek, including the water rights and the timber stand on the upper slope, to the woman he had arranged to marry, by name, Ida Marlowe of St. Louis, Missouri. She sat with the page, and sat with her own name written in a dead stranger's handwriting. He had put her name in his will before she arrived, which meant he had thought about what would happen if he wasn't there when she did. He knew he was ill, Luke said, reading what was on her face. Since summer. He didn't stop the correspondence because, he paused, because he said the woman who was answering his letters knew something about hard circumstances and deserved somewhere real to land, his words. Ida looked at the page. He never told me he was sick. No, he didn't want the nature of the arrangement to change. Luke's voice was even. He wanted you to come freely. She looked at the timber stand notation in the will. This is valuable property. Very. He leaned forward. There's a man in town named Orson Griggs, a land speculator, who has been trying to acquire that parcel for 18 months. He's known about the will since the day Corby died. He's been working out how to get around it. He held her gaze steadily. He'll come find you, probably today. I wanted you to see the will first. Why? She said. Because you should walk into every room in this town knowing what you're carrying, he said. That's the whole answer. Orson Griggs found her outside the county office an hour later. He had a town politician's handshake, the kind that told you his assessment before the grip finished, and he was accompanied by a younger man whose purpose in being there was to make her feel outnumbered. Miss Marlowe. Griggs smiled with considerable practice. What a difficult arrival you've had. Edwin spoke so warmly of you. What did you want to discuss, Mr. Griggs? Ida said. Only your situation. He spread his hands. A woman alone in a town she doesn't know, inheriting property she has no means to manage. I'd be glad to help you realize the value of what Corby left you, relieve you of the burden before winter complicates things. I'll contact the county attorney before I make any decisions about the property, Ida said. If you have a formal offer, put it in writing and send it to his office. Griggs's smile recalibrated. There's no need for attorneys to complicate a straightforward. Good day, Mr. Griggs, Ida said and walked away. She walked with her face composed and her hands steady. She was not certain what she had yet. She was not certain what Griggs could do. She needed information faster than she was getting it. She went to find Luke Hartwell. He was at his desk. He looked up when she pushed through the door and read her face in the way she was beginning to recognize, fast, complete, landing on something that shifted him forward in his chair. She told him about Griggs. He listened without interrupting. There's a county attorney in Ridgefield who handles property claims, he said when she finished. He already had a piece of paper in his hand. I'll send a wire this afternoon. He's honest and he's not connected to anyone in Griggs's circle. Today, she said. Griggs won't wait, Luke said. Neither should we. She filed the "we" without comment. She filed it carefully. Gordon Tice arrived 4 days later, younger than she'd expected, with ink-stained fingers and an organized manner. He reviewed the will, reviewed the property records, and looked up at her from the desk. The will is valid, properly witnessed, properly filed, entirely unambiguous. The property is yours, Miss Marlowe. All of it. Griggs will fight it, she said. He can try. What he has is a verbal agreement, which is to say nothing. Tice set down his pen. He was hoping to negotiate before you understood what the law says. He was hoping you didn't know. How long before he understands that I do? She asked. Let me arrange a meeting, Luke said. The meeting was in Tice's temporary office at the hotel. Griggs came with a lawyer named Carver, a man with aggressive posture and a city manner, and Ida sat across from them with Tice beside her. Luke stood at the wall, not at the table, just present, the way a fact is present. Carver produced a letter, a substantial offer, framed as a settlement. He slid it across the table as if the gesture itself were an argument. Tice read it. Ida read it. She set it down. This offer assumes I intend to leave. Carver adjusted his posture. It assumes you're a practical woman who understands the difficulty of managing rural property without. I'm staying in Copper Falls, Ida said. I have work here. I have property here. I'm not selling. Miss Marlowe. Griggs leaned in with the particular tone of a man switching tactics. You've been in this town less 2 weeks. You don't know the first thing about managing timber rights or... She owns them. Luke said it from the wall. Flat final. Not a challenge. A fact stated once in a tone that made clear it would not be restated. Griggs looked at him. Luke looked back. The silence was brief and entirely one-sided. Carver put the letter away. They filed out. Griggs passed Ida without looking at her, which told her everything she needed to know about how the room had gone. She walked out of the hotel into the cold October air and breathed. You did that well, Luke said beside her. Tice did the legal work, she said. Tice stated the law. He said it without emphasis, which was how he said things that mattered. You walked in and sat down when someone who was still frightened would have sent someone else in her place. Those aren't the same thing. She thought about precision. She thought about being careful with what she allowed herself to believe about a person. She filed it. She started at Gertrude's Mercantile that week and found she was good at it in the way she was good at most things she put her hands to. Not a small discovery after years of being managed into smallness. On Thursday morning, Luke appeared at the mercantile door. He was not alone. Beside him was a boy of about 7 with dark hair like his father's, and a serious expression that seemed too large for his face. The expression of a child who had gotten used to watching the world carefully. Ben had a question about something, Luke said. I told him the person to ask was here. The boy looked at her with the directness that small children had before they learned to perform politeness. Is it true you were a teacher? Yes, Ida said. 2 years. Ben considered this. The school here doesn't have a teacher right now, he said. Miss Aldred left in September. He paused. Pa said he didn't know anyone in town who was better suited. He said it to Mrs. Ponder. Luke looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had absolutely not coached his son to say this. Ida looked at the boy. He looked back with his father's quality of attention, complete, waiting, not performing anything. It was the most comfortable kind of looking she had experienced since arriving in Copper Falls. Nothing hidden in it. Tell me about your school, she said. She started teaching the following Monday. 9 children, ages 6 to 13. By the end of the first day, she could read each of them. Ben Hartwell sat in the 3rd row and watched everything with that still, serious quality that was simply how he was in a room. She had adjusted her approach before the afternoon session. Children were concrete problems, and she was faster at concrete problems than any other kind. The letter from Calvin Reese arrived in the 3rd week. She recognized his handwriting on the envelope, with the specific cold recognition of something your body remembers before your mind catches up. She opened it at the boarding house kitchen table, while Hetty sat across from her and did not pretend not to notice. Calvin had heard about the property. He had heard about the will. He wrote 3 paragraphs in the formal, reasonable tone he used when building towards something he intended to benefit from. The 3rd paragraph said he believed the correspondence arrangement he had facilitated, from his home, at his effort, had created an informal obligation on any property acquired through that arrangement. He was not filing anything yet. He was writing, he said, because families should handle these things privately. Ida set the letter on the table. She told Hetty what it said. Hetty looked at it for a moment. He wants you to be afraid of what he might do more than what he actually will. I know, Ida said. Are you? No, Ida said. I'm irritated. She picked up the letter. I need to go see Luke. She walked to the Marshal's office and she told him everything, not just the letter, but Calvin, St. Louis, her sister who had died in the house she'd been left in, and the arrangement Calvin had built to move her out of his life with the minimum of ungentlemanly effort. She told him, looking at the desk between them, plainly, because she had decided that if she was going to trust this man's judgment, and she had been for 3 weeks. She was not going to do it on half the information. When she finished, Luke was quiet for the particular seconds she had come to understand were not absence but processing. Then he said, he has no legal standing. You were 24 when you left St. Louis. There's no documented obligation, no formal arrangement on paper, just a man who wants you to believe the word family has legal weight. He held her gaze. What he has is the hope that it works on you. It doesn't, Ida said. I know, Luke said. I'll write to Tice tonight. She looked at him. She thought about the shape of the last 3 weeks. The wires sent at night. The stands taken in rooms she hadn't had to stand alone in. The way he appeared in front of places where she was, without making a performance of appearing. She thought about Ben in the 3rd row, asking about her school, and Luke's face when the boy repeated what he'd said to Mrs. Ponder. Luke, she said. He looked up. I want to ask you something directly. You always do, he said. It was not a complaint. It was the recognition of a man who had been paying careful attention and had catalogued this as simply how she was. Edwin Corby's will brought you into this. Griggs gave you a reason to stay in it, but Griggs has been answered and Tice has the legal question in hand. She held his gaze. So why are you still here? He set down his pen. He looked at her for a long moment. The complete, unhurried attention she had come to understand was how he looked at things he considered worth looking at. Because I want to be, he said, plainly, without anything added. That's the answer. It's not complicated. She held his gaze. She had been looking for the angle since the first evening. She had not found one. She had 3 weeks of evidence, and the evidence was solid, and she was done talking herself out of what solid evidence pointed toward. All right, she said. He waited. "I'm glad," she said, "that you want to be." She said it plainly, because she had learned from watching him that plainness was not the absence of meaning. It was meaning at its most concentrated, with nothing added to make it easier to receive. Something in his face changed. The controlled quality opened slightly. She was glad she was close enough to see it. Tice's formal response to Calvin's attorney arrived 2 weeks later. A letter Ida did not read, but that Tice described to her in 12 precise words. I explained the legal position, and they chose not to continue. Griggs's attorney sent one more inquiry about the timber rights in November. Ida replied through Tice that she was not interested in selling and would be leasing the water access to the 2 ranches downstream at a fair rate, a number she had worked out with Luke, one that gave both families security they hadn't had since Corby died. She was building something. She could feel it taking shape the way construction takes shape. Not all at once, but in the accumulation of specific visible pieces. The teaching position, the timber stand, held and managed, the water leases signed with 2 honest handshakes, Mrs. Ponder pressing extra biscuits on her plate each morning, with the silent emphasis of a woman supplying a campaign she had already decided to support. Ben Hartwell stayed after school one Tuesday to tell her. She explained fractions better than Miss Aldred had. "How do you know?" she said. "You never learned them from Miss Aldred." "Pat told me," Ben said, with the same devastating directness he'd shown in the mercantile. She looked at this boy, his father's stillness, his father's quality of attention, the particular bravery of a child who had lost his mother and had learned to watch carefully for what was real and what was not. He was watching her now, not performing anything, just waiting to see what she was. "You can go home, Ben," she said. "Tell your father supper's at 6 at Mrs. Ponder's if he hasn't already heard." Ben considered this for a moment. Then he nodded, the single decisive nod that was entirely his father's, and collected his jacket and left. She stood at the front of the empty classroom and felt, for the first time since she'd stepped off the train, entirely sure of where she was. Luke asked her on a Saturday in late November. He had arranged it. She knew because Gertrude told her without apparent subtlety to take the morning, and because Hetty appeared at her door at 8 o'clock with a particular expression and did something to her hair that was considerably better than what Ida would have managed alone. He was waiting at the eastern edge of the Corby property, where the timber stand began, and you could see the whole line of the creek below. He had his hat in both hands. He looked at her when she came through the fence gate and said, without preamble, because he had never preambled anything in his life, "I love you, Ida. I want to say that first, before the rest of it, because you deserve to hear it plainly." She went still. "I want to marry you," he said, "not because you need someone beside you. I've watched you for 2 months and I know better than that, but because I want to be the person you tell things to. The first person, and I want Ben to grow up knowing what it looks like when a woman stands in a room and doesn't move." He held her gaze without flinching. "And because I love you. I said that first and I meant it, and I'll say it as many times as you need to hear it." She looked at him. She looked at the creek below, and the timber stand, and the land that a dead man she had never met had thought to leave her, the man who had believed she would know what to do with something real. She thought about what choose meant when you had spent years being managed rather than choosing. She thought about 2 months and 3 weeks, and the particular specific weight of evidence she had been accumulating without letting herself call it by its right name. "Yes," she said, "that's what I want, all of it." He held out his hand, offering, not assuming. She took it. They stood at the edge of her land in the late November air, and the cold was clean and specific, and she felt it fully, the way she had been learning to feel things since she arrived in this town, without the compressed, careful management of a woman holding everything at arm's length in case it was taken. They were married in December in the church at the edge of town, with Mrs. Ponder and Hetty and Gertrude Bain in the front row. Both ranchers whose water leases she had signed came in from the south, Jim Reardon and Douglas Sett, red-faced from the cold and genuinely glad, which she had not expected and which moved her considerably more than she let show. Ben stood beside his father at the front of the church. When it was done and the room was quiet with the particular warmth of a thing completed, Ben looked at her with his careful, watchful eyes and said, "Okay," in the tone of a child who had done the arithmetic and found it satisfactory. Hetty beside her made a sound that was entirely too perceptive for the moment. That evening, at the house on the west end of town, their house now, a fact she was still learning the shape of, they sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the lamp lit between them, and she told him what she had been afraid of, the specific fear, the thing she had carried from St. Louis, the particular dread of arriving as part of an arrangement and what arrangements implied about the night they began. She told him plainly, without softening it, because she had decided that if this was the life she was building it from the foundation. He listened, he said when she finished. Nothing here belongs to the arrangement. Nothing. You tell me what you want and when you want it, and that is what we do. Your life is yours. His voice was even. That includes tonight. That includes every night. You choose. I'm here because you chose. She looked at him across the lamp. She had been collecting evidence for 2 months. She had looked for the angle and not found it. She had looked for the cost, and it was not there. Luke, she said, I know what I want. She looked at him without any armor. I'm telling you because you told me to tell you. He stood, he came around the table. He held out his hand. She took it. What followed was not the thing she had spent 3 days on a train dreading. It was nothing like fear. It was a choice made freely and received with the specific careful attention of a man who understood that the most important thing about a person was not what you could take from them, but what they had chosen to give. She lay in the dark afterward and thought about the woman who had gotten off a train in Copper Falls with $9 and a dead man's letter, and she thought that woman would not recognize this moment, and she thought that was not a sad thing. It was, without qualification, the best thought she had ever had. The teaching continued through spring. Ben learned fractions. Helen Reardon's daughter, who had been struggling with her letters all winter, read her first full sentence aloud on a Thursday in March, and the expression on her face, that particular brightness of a mind that has just done a thing it thought was beyond it, made Ida stand very still at the front of the classroom and understand something she had been moving toward since she stepped off the train. She was not surviving anymore. She had been surviving for so long that she had confused it with living. The careful management, the arithmetic, the holding of everything at arm's length until she knew whether it was safe, that had kept her intact and she did not regret it. But she was on the other side of it now. She could feel the difference in the way she walked home in the evenings, down the main street of Copper Falls, past the Marshal's office and the Mercantile, and the place where Orson Griggs had stood with his practiced handshake and his calculations. She walked past all of it and felt none of the old compression. Luke was on the porch when she came through the gate, in the particular way he was always present, not demonstratively, just there, the way a solid thing is there. He looked up. "Good day," he said. "Helen Reardon's daughter read her first sentence," she said. He smiled. The real one, the one she had been watching develop since the beginning, the one that had been coming for 2 months before it finally arrived. It was, she thought, worth all the watching. She sat beside him in the cold early spring air and thought about Edwin Corby, who had never met her and had thought far enough ahead to write her name in a will and leave her somewhere real to land. She thought about what she would have said to him, if she could. She thought about it for a while, with the particular unhurried attention she had learned from living in this town, in this house, with this man. She thought she would have said, "Thank you for the land. I knew what to do with it." She held Luke's hand in the evening quiet and let Copper Falls go about its business around them, and she did not grip, and she did not brace, and she was not afraid. She was exactly where she had chosen to be, and the choosing had made her real in a way she had not been before. Not the managed, compressed version of herself she had been in St. Louis, not the careful woman with the arithmetic and the carpetbag, but the full specific person who had walked off a train into the wrong life and built the right one anyway. The land was hers, the teaching was hers. The marriage was chosen, and the house was filled, and Ben Hartwell had started leaving his jacket on the hook by the door without being told, which was a small thing, and was also, she had learned, exactly how real things announced themselves. Not all at once, just steadily, day by day, until the life you are living is the one you always meant to have.